international and universal law. We're not talking here about eliminating our animal instincts of territory and survival, but even our four-legged relatives, small, large, black, white, special breed, or mutt, learn quickly and know that when there are rules in the playground of life, we can wrestle and tussle, but not break the skin nor harm each other. We learn, exercise, and actually have fun together. Tremendously resilient in times of adversity or war, be it in Angola, Darfur, Bosnia, or Iraq. Born into every culture, this is the way all our children would like to spend much of their days together. When we set the rules over and over and over again, night and day, we continually learn to share, to give and take, to understand each other, and to slide. Let's educate early about the reality that getting to the goal, sinking the shot, best happens with good teamwork. When nation passes to nation, race to race, culture to culture, political party to political party. When calamity strikes, be it by nature or worse by man, we'll surely need each other. To score the goal of a dream and to create a better life, we have to and we can do it together. If you're open, I'll pass you the ball. Isn't the transcendence of a great orchestral work only possible in how each of us listens, hears, and is connected to all the others around us?
I think looking at the reality and trying to understand realities and trying to look at other people not simply from your perspective but from their perspective. And once in every while trying to look at ourselves through the perspective of others would be a great help.
Let's come home. Our beautiful, tiny, delicate planet needs us. We've got some rough seas again. But from every corner of the globe, rising up all through the ages, there's guidance from and to the same paths, encouraging us to triumph over our own blind ignorance, self-made catastrophes, deepest loss and pain. No matter how much horror may befall us, and it is horror, with each bit of fear, there's just that much less healing, less love, less meaningful life, less compassion, which is the most powerful light force on the earth. Even though we in New York City no longer look at airplanes the same way, that's not going to stop us from flying towards creating a better world for all humanity. We are not separate. No one here pretends to have all the answers, but each glimmer of hope supports and lights another. So for now, thanks for listening to others with me.
Trying to do the positive things. I mean, instead of being prepared to fight whatever threats you face, you should do something to eliminate the causes of the threats that you face.
You have a world which is unequal in terms of power, it is unequal in terms of wealth, and it is unequal in terms of capacities. So the challenge before the world community is to see how to reconcile these inequalities, how to overcome these inequalities in order to establish a system which is more stable and sustainable than the one we created in 1945.
What I see is a different approach in the way the UN works. Adjust the structure to what needs to be done and not vice versa. Right now it's like a very painful birth here, because every time that you try to move anything here, you have to draw on the previous customs, the way things were, and not say it has to be done through such and such channel because that was made that way in 1945.
Yeah.
It does not necessarily respond to that challenge.
When I came here, I had more, let's say, hope that it is possible somehow to move a little bit faster than it is. But it appeared that it's very difficult because the inertia of the bureaucracy is very high.
My concern is that there is not a serious dialogue amongst the UN members. It seems like everyone is talking and not really we are listening.
This body was made for other purposes, and basically it's been very successful and very effective in sparing the world from a major international war.
The UN itself is not a body which makes decisions. Decisions are made in different places, mainly in DC, in Washington.
Right now.
Of course, in some other places as well, in Moscow, let's say, or Beijing, or in the capitals. And the UN is the mechanism for the implementation of that decisions, and that is very valuable for the UN, because there is no other mechanism. If the UN is excluded, you have the picture like we have in Iraq. That always creates much more problems than the UN-led processes.
One major threat is not having a proper security system. One can say that there are a number of crimes in the city of New York, but if you don't have a proper police force, you will never deal with them.
Some of us are having a harder time getting to work in the morning. The primary purpose for founding the United Nations was to stop wars, to regulate the sale of armaments, and to establish international security, an international security system. It was to develop and propagate international norms and law, without which life will return to the unbearable. Yes, terror cells are hidden everywhere, and the conventional war response kills mostly civilians too. Why United Nations? As Secretary General Mr. Urgarat said, perhaps the UN was not meant to bring us to heaven as much as to save us from hell. Do we need to relearn this over and over again? The UN was to be an answer to inhumanity, to unthinkable tragic losses and desperate questions. The words never again rose from our lips, but without forming and agreeing on a system of international security, we have man-made horrors and atrocities again and again and again. Each and every one supported by larger competing power, ideology, and industrial profiteers. The nations most of us are citizens of, all powers, knowingly or unknowingly, directly or indirectly, supported the worst of human nature. Sure, the UN needs genuine reform. What institution doesn't? Let's help. It's only as good as we each join in and make it happen. Unite to end totalitarianism of any kind, be it Islamic or in the name of any other ideology. Unite to educate and interrupt hatred of others. And these were relatively small detonations, but nuclear and other dangerous materials have been let loose. They are out there. Albert Einstein forewarned us. Unleashed atomic power has changed everything save our modes of thinking. Thus, we drift into unparalleled catastrophe. Like him, it's vital we all out support its containment and treaties which verify its transparency and peaceful use. Biological and nuclear releases will be much, much worse than anything we have ever witnessed. Another reason to get completely unified around prevention now. We need a functioning United Nations because epidemic diseases are ravaging our families and communities around the globe. We need to help each other with pollution, keeping our common air breathable, our waters drinkable, and aquatic life abundant, our land productive and healthy, our environment livable. These are all lesser mentioned but contributing concerns needing our global support.
The kind of thinking, the kind of cogitation about world problems that goes around here, there is a great deal of serious thinking. Not all of it may be something which you can agree with, but that's not the point. The fact is people are engaged in issues of great pith and moment, as substance, as you might say. And in that sense, I think it is important to feel engaged, to be discussing things.
In the Iraq crisis, there was disagreement. It was not possible to agree on an intervention by the United States.
Why the UN is not giving any support for all these adventures oriented, oil oriented or whatever.
It would be much better if there was a consensus, but you cannot force a consensus, and it's healthy. But also there is an organ where these discussions take place, and if there is disagreement, there is a discussion of this disagreement.
Excellences, Monsieur Dominique Galuzzo, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Messieurs les ambassadeurs, davantage de sécurité, davantage de démocratie. Mais il existe une autre logique que celle de la force, un autre chemin, d'autres solutions. Nous comprenons le sentiment profond d'insécurité dans lequel vit la population américaine depuis la tragédie du 11 septembre 2001. Le monde entier a partagé la douleur de New York et de l'Amérique, frappée au cœur. Je le dis au nom de l'amitié que nous portons au peuple américain, au nom de nos valeurs communes, la liberté, la justice, la tolérance. Mais rien n'indique aujourd'hui qu'il y ait un lien entre le régime irakien et Al-Qaïda. Et le monde sera-t-il plus en sécurité après une intervention militaire en Irak? Je veux vous dire la conviction de mon pays. Non.
The United Nations, with all the criticisms that have been done, has a real power that counts in the world, and with counting with this power, you can achieve results that without that you cannot. You simply cannot. Power is also the ability to achieve results. The influence, the prestige, the legitimacy that the United Nations can bring adds enormously to your capacity to achieve those goals. You need to assemble all the means that will allow you to achieve the results you want.
If you look at what happened, let's say over the past few years, you will realize that whenever there was cooperation between nations, between countries, some things were done, and they were done for the good cause. Whenever there was no cooperation, nothing moved, and if it moved for a bad cause, I would say.
What they're doing in a sort of scientific type of way is that they are figuring out what are the major threats in the world today, and how they interact. How, I don't know, terrorism, say, it takes roots from intolerance, and how intolerance takes roots from education, and education from poverty, and governance from that kind of thing. We need a structure that is able to deal with those threats. That is the most important part.
There's a lot of discussion in New York sometimes as to whether it's poverty or the fight against terrorism that has to have the priority. A poor woman in an African village who goes hungry to bed and who cannot feed her children, she might not worry so much about international terrorists, but in the final analysis it can hit her too.
The young people, might associate poverty with the tradition and might hate their way of life. So when you are frustrated, you don't know. You start hating what you have. You start saying, well, this is responsible for our poverty, everything, So I think if we don't fight out the poverty and improve the livelihood of the people, they would simply reject whatever they have, and they will look outside, and that worries me, and that you see among the young people.
The radical Islamists, they do not come from nowhere.
Whenever there is extreme poverty,
no jobs, there is no economic justice,
and hopelessness,
there are no rights, no democracy, no freedom, an absence of prospects for the youth.
This is the environment in which people turn to a faith-based existence. That is not a bad thing in itself.
The only political organized force was the Islamic, who are disciplined, who are structured, who know how to work with the grassroots organization, who help the poor with food and medical care.
But when those faith-based solutions are combined with a sense of injustice and persecution, then we create the conditions to recruit foot soldiers.
This is the way they work. When the government fails to provide for the people, they act very efficiently. And then they occupy the political arena.
There is not enough focus on preventing the formation of the ground where terrorism can find recruits. We think that development is the best weapon you have.
It's a favorite word of some and anathema to others, but at the end of the day, if we ignore the word root causes and talk about what leads to stable societies, there's no doubt that economic development, sustainable economic development, plays a very significant role.
What's the main surprising and potentially quite dangerous development last months is the weakening of the transatlantic link between Europe and the United States. That's potentially very dangerous because we need to have the rich North to be united, be very strongly united, not in the hunting and clash of civilizations style, but because we have our responsibilities to help the other guys to solve the wishes and connections between cream and root.
To bring, the modern technology to the third world countries so that they also have the opportunity.
How do you deal with all those millions of people trying to come to Europe, for instance. Today we try to distinguish between, you know, the political refugees and the economic refugees, and we extend a kind of special treatment to the political and not to the economic, as if the economic was not political at the end of the day. And we all know it is, and we all know that every human being has the right to search for a better future for himself and his family.
How to create the jobs, it has always been a problem. And not to create artificial jobs.
Right.
So for Bosnia it's a big problem. Yeah. It's the biggest problem in Bosnia at the moment.
Yeah.
It's jobs.
Last year alone we shut down some 600 inbound industries right at the border to China. We lost them to China. 600 companies, not jobs, companies. So it's a tremendous strain on us. The average Chinese salary is 6 times lower than the average Mexican salary. We cannot compete with them. So basically what is happening is that the market has a privilege to go to places where they will get very cheap labor force. And then by doing that, they're losing consumers where they had them already. For the market, it's a net loss of 250,000 people and their families that were consumers and are no longer consumers. So it's a sort of like a paradox there.
Building up the empowerment of some of the various classes in our society, particularly at the lower rungs, to give them greater political power. That process has also been one of the major processes in India.
I was in India from 91 to 95. And I went back last year and I could see the enormous change. Like the middle class population had grown enormously. Because we all know that the middle class population is the backbone of every nation.
If you were to get economic development where only the top levels, the sort of the richer classes were only to benefit, that makes for a very brittle society eventually.
Rich people have year by year less children and more money. And the poor people have quite the opposite, less money for more children. That at the end I question myself all the time, how long can it last?
You have to create conditions also to invest in the well-being of the people. How many brilliant scientists or athletes or I don't know, artists, writers have we lost during so many years because you could not bring this bright brain to school. All this is absolutely impossible without development, unless you want to restrict this to a certain group of people, and that is not democratic, I would say.
Today the worry about security is much, much larger than it was 3 or 4 years ago. The investment of the world in security issues or security connected issues is tremendous, and is hampering a proper development of the economy, for instance, on the other hand.
We are pressed from the industrialized countries. And we are highly vulnerable because we are small, we are scattered, our armed forces are very small, we could say almost non-existent. So the cost to guarantee the safety for us, for foreigners, for navigation, for the airplanes is very, very high. And this has its effect on our development.
The magic, if I may call it that way, has not come about. the political strains are perhaps larger than ever. When people are asked frequently in Latin America, would you prefer to have a strong man or a dictator of sorts, a benevolent dictator that could solve your economic problems? And people say, yes, I would prefer that to democracy. That's a terrible, terrible sign. So we really need to create some international environment to accommodate the prosperity of democracy. Otherwise, there would be tremendous reversals in so many places. And I'm not talking just about, I'm thinking about just Latin America.
America is a sort of dream, but not the universal solution. And of course, as it is with all the dreams, if you come close enough to the dream, you can see absolute belief that my place is the best in the world. In all the countries all around the world, just would be called extreme nationalism. But because nationalism is a dirty, politically incorrect word, it's called patriotism.
Democracy cannot be imported. What is important is the idea of justice.
You have a call for international trade, liberalization, opening up of societies. And then you would see also, you open up, but I will keep the protection of my own society, because the West is the stronger party right now. That is not the proper approach of doing things.
Every Thursday, in this corner, in front of the Cuban mission to the US, there is a group which has a permission by NYPD, and they are threatening us, and they are sending letters, they are making calls. We will kill you, we will cut your throats, we will kill your children, and everything. And which one is the reply? How is it possible? No, this is freedom of speech. If the US government is fighting terrorism, they had to start from the very beginning, from the inside. So it's not possible to be talking about two terrors. A bad one against the US, which is bad, and the other one coming from the US to third countries, that this is a so-called good terrorism. So this is a double standard.
For example, United States was advising democracy to the Afghans, but the same country is accepting the Saudi regime, and also the behavior of the Israeli governments against the Palestinians.
In the Everglades area, they are people that they are training themselves for the so-called liberation of Cuba. This is a very public activity, and they are carrying on some weapons, heavy weapons, from where? From the supermarket, from the mall, from where it's possible to get a rocket launcher here in this country, that they have so-called a high alert against terrorism from all the rainbow colors, from orange to red, from yellow. We are suited to this. We have been condemning terrorism in all forms, by whoever, whomever, and wherever is committed.
The Comprehensive Convention Against Terrorism actually tries to define who a terrorist is, and that's it's kind of it's an aphorism, but one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and it sounds glib, but it very much is at the heart of the issue.
Someone who is under occupation has the right to fight for ending the occupation.
How do you permit people who are oppressed, or who see themselves as oppressed, as having a legitimate way to remove that oppression.
Which exists everywhere. You know, here in this wonderful country, George Washington, when he was fighting the British colonialists, he was called by the British terrorists.
Yeah,
Recently, Mandela was called by the apartheid regime terrorist. Now he's a Nobel Prize. So we have to be sure. When tell me the people that they did September 11th, definitely those are terrorists, and we have to eradicate the people that bombed just 2 days ago, 2 synagogues in Istanbul. This is a terrorist act.
And at the same time, you want to control terrorism. Well, I don't have any magic wand, unfortunately, but acts of violence against the civilian population are never acceptable. If everyone started with that premise, acts of terrorism would be much more difficult to perpetrate.
We're living in a very difficult moment.
You see a very serious hatred of the United States growing in the Islamic world, and you also see on this side from our point of view, a very serious misrepresentation of the Islamic world taking root in the American public opinion.
I was here when September 11 happened. This horrible event took all of us by surprise, okay? And people, when they're taken by surprise, sometimes they're reacting. And when we are reacting instead of acting, we can be very emotive and do a lot of harm. You know, I can never forget the day after my daughter was in a boarding school. She called me, she said, Dad, she was crying. My best friend, she came today and she told me, listen, Maria, we cannot be friends anymore. I told her, why? You know, just because my parents, and this is the matter of education, my parents told me that you, the Muslim, you have in your, she said, in your Bible, in your book, that you are ordered to kill all non-Muslims. This is such silly.
And this is leading to a phobia, mutually reinforcing. One phobia, sort of Islamophobia here, and what I want to call a Westophobia in the Islamic world. And these two phobias are reinforcing, and unless we take measures to arrest them and hopefully to reverse them, then we are in for a clash.
The happiest people, if the clash is going to happen, are definitely the terrorists and the fundamental. They will be the happiest people. I was addressing some students in one university in the Middle East, and I was a little bit shocked about the hate that developed about America recently, what's happening in the Middle East and in Iraq and this, and you know, they were reacting very violently. Then at one moment, I had to stop this. I said, listen, just let me tell you one thing. Is there anyone here in this classroom who already visited the United States? So nobody raised his hand. I told him, listen, I just want to be very honest with you and to tell you the truth as it is. I'm one of yours. If you go there, the people you are going to meet are very wonderful people, very nice people, very sociable, are going to help you. Don't think that all of them are Al Capone or cowboys. No. Don't mix some of the foreign policy with the people. Because immediately after, they were just asking questions. They want to learn more.
You reflect on the course of human history and what happened in medieval period when Jews and Muslims and Christians were capable of creating a model state in Cordoba and in Granada. Christians interpreted the Muslims, interpreted the Jewish. They created a marvelous culture. Why can't we do that again? so much that they learn from each other. Before Europe went through the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, they opened translating centers to translate Arab treaties and texts from Baghdad to Damascus, Cordoba. Grenada.
We have a civilizational presence. There is, at an average level, a sense of our larger connections as a community. There are always influences, there are always tendencies and trends in India which are narrow, which are parochial. That is true of any society. But I think if you look at it in the broader sense, you will see that there has been a tradition in India of acceptance of outside influences.
We have the Chinese, we have the Indians, we have the Arabs, we have local Malays, we have the indigenous people. We have lived in this society for a long time.
A confidence to be able to integrate it and look forward into a kind of a positive interaction with the outside world. That has been our strength. In the 16th century, you had the Chinese navigator Zheng He visiting Calicut. At the beginning of the era of the great navigators, was inaugurated with the discovery of the sea route by Vasco da Gama.
In our case, every time there's a Christmas, we go to Christian friends. They have their own party. We go there, and if it's Chinese New Year, we go to the Chinese. We have Muslims, Eid. Our non-Muslim friends will come to our house. So this has been a tradition in Brunei for a long, long time. So I think if that can happen in Brunei, it can happen in other places. Yeah.
Kerala had in fact one of the earliest Jewish communities before Christ. It has had the earliest Christian communities from the 1st century. And I think subsequently it has also had a very strong Islamic community, a Muslim community from the Gulf. That kind of experience has enriched our cultural life in many ways.
And it's enriched our lives too. It's the world's strength.
Christmas, Hanukkah, Ramadan, Ramadan, Christmas, Hanukkah, Ramadan, Ramadan, Christmas, Hanukkah, Ramadan, Ramadan, Christmas, Hanukkah, Ramadan, Ramadan.
As with most international cities around the world, within a 5-minute walk from our doors, we worship, we pray, we give thanks, we listen and ask for guidance, we sit still, and we fellowship. And in our communities we break bread together. All of us thrive on and enjoy sharing the generations of secrets handed down through the centuries, from our kitchens, our fires, our meals, our tables.
Christmas, Hanukkah, Ramadan, Ramadan, 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 Christmas, Hanukkah, Ramadan.
Now it is more and more clear with the globalization process, with the world becoming smaller. The 9/11 was a turning point.
The United States after 9/11 is different than the United States before that.
Okay, we are somewhere far, and all these guys have problems. We are safe here, and it appeared that this is not the case anymore. And you cannot just live in the heaven while others living in the hell.
The United States is very much involved in development work. It will probably take a little bit more time that people start again thinking how they could help. Because this, what happened here, this 9/11 was something that we in Europe, we probably don't understand it, but when I listen to some of my American friends, it caused a real trauma in American minds, that we can be attacked like that.
We have to go beyond this episode. That was an ugly episode because the reactions might increase the sense of insecurity and does not decrease it, the reactions. So you have to work in a collective manner. You cannot sort it out alone. You will have to rely on the support of the world, and the United States received the support of the world. Received. Immediately after 9/11, there has been a great call for let's bring it to a stop.
There are non-governmental organizations, NGOs, around the world picking up where governments fail. Many doing great and selfless work for humanity in the worst of circumstances, funded by your generous hearts, caring for the sick, the abandoned, the brutalized, the starving, those without rights. And then there are those.
We can say that NGOs are the biggest thing which happened in the last 10 years. And when I say NGOs, I must say that probably the most famous NGO of this time is called Al-Qaeda. It's Laden's NGO. That's a typical non-state actor which has a lot of supporters all over, has nothing to do with the state, can for some time reside as a parasite in one state, but it's not bound absolutely.
Now, terrorism is as much a challenge for the United States as it is for Iran. Extremism is as much a challenge for the US as it is for Iran. Al-Qaeda, for instance, was our enemy long before it became US enemy. If you look at this problem from a global perspective, that is, terrorism is a global problem. It requires everybody pitching in, everybody contributing to its solution. Then you can find a solution, possibly, because it's a major challenge. You can possibly find a solution. But if you consider it your problem and a problem that you can stop at your doorsteps and prevent it from attacking your borders, then I do not think anybody can resolve the problem, because global problems cannot be resolved through national unilateral measures.
And the day after tomorrow, the main concern will be hunger and poverty, which is something that people don't talk about, which is unbelievably important, But you and me today, the main concern is terrorism. I am convinced that the terrorists, Al-Qaeda or whichever, will strike again in the next few months.
National intelligence gathering information, and in many countries, and there are more than one, they don't necessarily share information even amongst themselves, let alone with others. And until there's a great deal more of that kind of trust and sharing, we will always be less than fully equipped to deal with terrorism.
If you cannot exchange information, there is no level of trust
between authorities of your neighboring countries, then the regional approach to terrorism will not prosper.
I guess that's the silver lining with these terrible events, is that it seems to be forcing us to be more cooperative, huh?
It has, but
sounds
you
like a
would
great
think
move.
that with the degree of violent terrorist acts that have occurred, there would be more cooperation.
As long as they have 5 or 6 shelters, you are doomed.
Right.
You are doomed.
Yeah.
As long as 5 or 6 countries don't cooperate, you are doomed.
Uh-huh.
They go there, they look for shelter, they wait, and then they strike again.
There's no substitute for international cooperation. We have to all have confidence and trust on one another so as to share intelligence information, for instance, so as to track financial assets that terrorists may have and freeze them. That kind of thing is what we need.
We are faced also with the problem of an intense armed trafficking around the world, and we know, all of us, that armed trafficking is connected with terrorism and connected with drugs and connected with money laundering. I mean, it's obvious that these weapons come from a rich country.
Mm-hmm.
We know who is, but nobody does anything about it.
These are weapons that unfortunately circulate around the world because producing and exporting countries have not had the political will to truly mark and trace those weapons as should be done. You know, a Coca-Cola can, you can trace it from the moment it's been produced to where it has been put on the shelf, to where it has been consumed, and where it has been thrown into the trash, and where it's being recycled. A smaller light weapon, you can't, because we don't have an international binding instrument whereby all producing and exporting countries must mark their weapons.
These are the selection of the mines we find in the province. American, Egyptian, these are from the Soviet bloc, Chinese or South African copy, Belgium, Romanian, Italian, German, Russian, Israeli, Cuban. Every country that's ever produced a mine, it's probably here.
International corporations which are economically stronger than the countries they reside in.
Not only are number corporations more powerful than most of the nations on Earth, but they heavily influence the most powerful of nations. When we were taught to pledge allegiance to this flag, it clearly was to the great founding spirit and guiding ideals of our country, not to corporate bylaws, corporate mission statements, or dedication to profit and bottom lines, no matter how much they wear the flag. Many do great works, but as President Eisenhower warned us of the rising military-industrial complex, international corporations need the regulation, the transparency, and the leadership that can continuously transform them to the benefit of the higher aspects of our human ingenuity and community. What is the best America offers? We won't be the superpower for forever, I know, but
yes, but for a few years you will be. Yes.
we have a great opportunity, don't we?
Yes.
We have a great opportunity.
But China is coming, and I was in December. I was in China for a meeting of United Nations, and I was a few years in Beijing, and I had the feeling that this huge country is mounting it. As I mean, in 50 years, things will be changed.
Maybe 20 or...
Yes,
yeah.
maybe, yes.
That's why it's to our advantage, I think, to establish international norms
yes.
and to be concerned with justice, because when China becomes number one, we know they have a history of, well, like Tibet, and I mean, they have... Human rights has not been top on their, on their shelf.
For the lack of a better term, I call it glorification of military might. Once power and military might is glorified, the consequence is indeed horrifying. Why do I say this? Because the only thing that prevents people from resorting to brute force is acceptance of some common values. If you looked at the coverage of the Iraq War, you saw that simply destruction of various places as if something good was happening.
Those embedded journalists coming with the US troops with all this paraphernalia of media, of cameras on satellite and everything, we were seeing how bombs were landing, touching, big explosion. What we didn't see, dead people from the other side. So this is something that the other side of the equation, you won't find it in the big media of this country or international media, that this is also controlled by the media of this country.
Yeah,
so you know that 90% of the media, of the huge, the major journalists, or the so-called dailies all over the world, everything is interconnected. This is a chain, this is like the big alliance. And this is, we are not talking, and they say, no, this is the freedom of press. Freedom of press of what? So we are counting now the US soldiers or the US GIs, but we are not counting the Iraqis. Nobody is counting how many Iraqis has been dying after the invasion or during the invasion or before the invasion. And they are human beings, like the GIs or like anyone else. We are all human beings.
It's very sad because there are so many soldiers that have been killed, and the families must be very sad.
Yeah.
Yes, very sad. Terrible situation of children in the war now. Children in war, because children sometimes are enlisted, children of 14 and 13 years of age. Terrible.
It is terrible.
The situation.
We want peace for Vietnam. We don't want to see war anywhere. Not in Middle East, not in Iraq. And if you saw what people, are suffering from, this kind of, hostilities, going on there, it's a pain, to see that.
I would be the happiest man in the world if Bosnia could be non-military zone.
Yeah.
As a person who was in the war from 1992 to 1995 and who saw all the nightmare of the conflict, I look with a more optimistic view for the future than it was immediately after the war when everything was really destroyed.
As far as Rwanda is concerned, we went through a very, very desperate, if I can put that way, period It's been a crisis which was grounded by past policies which built up this machine of social and political, even economical exclusion.
You have a philosophy of exclusion of the other and doctrines of exclusion and not of inclusion. This is a destructive approach, and those approaches cannot work in the long run. And you know, if you go back into history, you are going to see that humanity has been through similar phenomena in the past, and every time they ended up in catastrophe. I have been ambassador to Ireland for 2 years, and I have seen there again this opposition between the Catholics and the Protestants, and I know and I can understand how easy it is to divide people and how difficult it is to bring them together again.
Whenever I bring this on the table, there are people who are very, very hostile toward this principle of humanitarian intervention, under which, for instance, the genocide in Rwanda could have been prevented, under which other problems taking place in different parts of the world can be prevented from happening after long debates and discussions on terminology and so forth, that a peacekeeping mission or a country is authorized to intervene somewhere after thousands of lives have been lost. So how to make sure that there is no loss of human lives for the sake of being complacent to international law? I hope a move can be done.
And if there should be that kind of resorting to military action, it has to be a legal, legitimate action, an action that is supported by the international community, or even to whatever that is happening inside a society that threatens the stability of a region or the stability of the world. That is an action that is accepted today, but there has nevertheless to be criteria.
Now, if a superpower can resort to force and very openly reject principles and shared values, then you cannot expect lesser powers or those without power not to try to achieve power from other means. And that is where you get terrorism.
One of the biggest problem is when people, they think that they got the absolute truth in their hand.
We will come to the point where everyone will realize that there are concerns of the other nations and other states. There are different perceptions. There are worries, and that we live in a global world. We live in Titanic, modern Titanic. We have to study the different cultures, we have to study different positions, we have to know much more about each other. We don't have to look at the facts from the superficial level. That's something that I think is the era that starts now. It's not just, you know, about the phenomenon or civilization from 5 minutes reading.
Reach out for people who are living in their isolated worlds, and not to replace their world with your own, but try to understand the inner mechanics of their universe.
You have to find ways for that guys to either share with you the values that is essential here for the society, or somehow manage the system in the way that not to turn them to be your enemies, and make friends.
We are in this area for thousands of years. We have very good relations with most of Muslim countries. We have absolute respect for those people, and I think we have also something which is very important. We have knowledge. We know these people. We know them and we understand them. They have, you know, another background. They have another religion, but still all they want is to live. We should support the positive elements.
Judge Sharon, he came and said, okay, I'm going to finish the problem by force, give me 2 months. This is more than 2 years. We're in a worse situation. And I liked so much what the Pope said just 2 days ago. In the Middle East, we don't need fence. We need bridges.
If you have to identify your loved one's body part on the street, if you had to respond not to one, but hundreds of attacks, year after year, you'd understand why, through the centuries, mankind has put up walls, why so much of the essential resources we need for peace are diverted for security. But walls have never worked forever. Most of us want to return to a more complete and safe life with each other. Humanity does what we can to rebuild the relations and trust over time, to eventually dissolve the walls we put up. We call for our leadership from all corners to listen to the other side of the wall, to endlessly pursue the vision, encourage the courage, to recognize and support the continuous personal work of building and maintaining bridges.
Where are we heading? Why is it happening in this manner? How would we diffuse the tension?
We have to prove them wrong. And we have to prove the radicals who are preaching this, the philosophy of violent resistance, that the international system can indeed offer justice, equity, and progress.
The United States is in a position, or can be in a position, to help solve once forever the problem, the Palestinian problem.
That has to be settled, and a just settlement. And the possibilities are there, and it can be settled.
It's obvious that if the Palestinian problem is solved, many of the problems that we have in terms of terrorism and violence, etc., in the region and outside the region will be drastically reduced.
Some of them would like to trace it back here to the Crusade, and there they tried it. But again, as I said before, we should not allow this to take place, because we will be all defeated.
For those who actually fought or lived in these lands at the time, as now, the Crusades were never this glorious. They were brutal, tragic, and avoidable. born from arrogance and ignorance of each other.
Humane and noble mores and norms must triumph. We should not let those people who are looking in a very closed-minded way to take over.
We accepted Christianity around 320, and the Muslim came to Ethiopia during the time of Muhammad. Since they lived from the very beginning, there is a natural thing which cements them together. We lived many years, thousands of years, together. In our history, we didn't have religious war. And now, the religion itself is changing. Too many versions of Christianity are coming to Ethiopia. And much more Muslim version is spreading in Ethiopia.
So different missionaries, you mean, of Christian faiths are coming in, and missionaries of Muslim faiths are coming in? And they, on both sides, they're kind of radicalizing?
Yes. Things are changing in the wrong direction.
As far as the Al-Qaeda and its associates and cells are concerned, we have to deal with what is it that is gaining them recruits. We have to find ways of ensuring that the problems and conflicts that exist in the Islamic world are addressed in a way that are seen to be fair to the people concerned. And the US can contribute to that, and it can change the environment through fair solutions to these problems. Of course, it's easier said than done, but at least the objectives should be that.
I am convinced that the world, the international community has the means to do a lot and to decrease, not to increase, the risks that we are facing today. Of course, there will always be people that are mad and Unabombers and
Unabomber, Terry McVeigh, and the anthrax. These are terrorism. And you don't go and start bombing small towns in the Midwest just because some of the guys there, those white supremacist organizations start bombing the federal building in Oklahoma. How do they deal with that? They should try to do the same with whatever is happening in the Middle East. In order to counter this, the breeding ground for terrorism, you need to have people, with at least hope in life. There's a better future for them.
I do believe that one very, very strongly one of the key things to fight and to eradicate terrorism or frustration or this is through education, definitely.
Obviously, there is an interest in developing countries to reduce military expenditures just because that allows you to augment your social and educational expenditures, as was done in Costa Rica. And that's one of the reasons why we have the highest life expectancy rate in all of the Americas, because actually we have higher life expectancy than the US and Canada, because we have invested a lot in that. But obviously that opens the way for many other developing countries to really concentrate on the daily welfare of their population. And instead of investing in arms and troops, which may or may not be used, there are very important conflicts, no doubt. Why not invest in something that you will need on a daily basis, which is health and education?
We have a defense force.
Right.
It's small, will be not less than 3,000. But what we believe is that the more the budget is focused on education, is the better for a country, medium and long term. And so that's our major capital, is education. Invest on people.
Between China and India, we represent almost 2/5 of the world's population. We have been fortunate in having some kind of sense of a long-term strategy. Jawaharlal Nehru, one of our early leaders, did talk of building the new temples of modern India, whether they were the dams and irrigation systems, which were the infrastructure of our early years of development. But more importantly, the emphasis on tertiary education, on higher education, in terms of the institutes of technology.
You don't go out and bomb Moscow to defeat the Soviet Union. It's all the uprising from the people. You've got to increase the soft power through cultural exchange, education, more scholarship, people who are already accepted in universities, being restricted to come here to study and all this. And to me, it's such a sad thing. The end result is completely opposite to what we want to achieve.
Wherever there is freedom of thought and freedom of expression, fanatical groups become weak because their rationale is weak. But when there is no one to present the other side of the story, when there is no credible intellectual challenge to their doctrines, then they flourish.
In school, you are teaching people to hate another one, to hate another religion, or another faith, or another race, or ethnic.
Yeah.
This is a criminal. This is very criminal. Yeah. I remember in some meetings with the Taliban, and I realized that the Taliban, when you talk to them on a personal basis, first of all, they were all of them in their 20s, young boys, very sincere people. The real problem with them was ignorance. They're so ignorant. So ignorance, one of them said, no, but the Christians are doing this. And then I stopped and said, which Christian you are talking about? And then I was more shocked when I realized that the man never heard about Catholic, Protestant. I told him, listen, now they have completely different religion and there are so many other groups, and I was a little bit so shocked. It's the same thing in the Islamic world. It's huge, it's so disparate, it's have so many tendencies, so many forces, so many way of thinking, so many schools. So it's a dialogue between Muslim and Christian. You know, when I'm talking, I can, as a Muslim, have so many affinities with a lot of my Christian friend or Jewish friend or Buddhist or whatever, than with some other Muslims. You know, it's those are realities. You know, there are so many dimensions in life.
What we ought not to do is to allow fundamentalists and extremists in either of our societies, either whether in the West or in the Islamic world. We ought not to allow extremists whose agenda dictates a clash. We have to marginalize them in both societies, in the Islamic world as well as in the Western world.
We will not allow fanaticism to distort our perception of each other. This we should always resist.
And we have to promote a common approach in the middle among those who have moderate, tolerant understanding of the complexities of each other's societies and are able to work together.
The best education is based on what happened really through history, without any complex, based on pushing young people to understand the others.
Yeah.
And based, especially, I don't like the word tolerance. I don't like tolerance just because tolerance should be only just the first step and the beginning, because when you are tolerant, it means that you disagree with someone and you let him leave. I would rather prefer the word respect. The German and the French, they had war religion between Catholic and Protestant, cultural hatred. Then the two people, they get a wonderful chance after the drama of Second World War to have two visionary men. They agreed about very small things to rebuild a new Europe, that now we have a generation they can never and ever imagine a possibility again between of war between France and Germany. Yeah. So if it was possible in Europe, why not in the Middle East? Maybe of the lack of visionaries.
How can we dramatically make a change in terms of building up a more global solidarity? Utopist, but it's achievable. It's achievable anyway. It's achievable anyway. It's a matter of bringing about some concessions and we think deeper and positively how we interact as nations globally and as human beings.
At a time when we have been through all those experiences of ethnic cleansing, it is important to show that the only ethically and morally acceptable way of doing things is to bring people together.
When the country was finally liberated, we had decades in which we had an economic crisis. At time, we thought that this crisis was having no way out. Nowadays, the majority of the American people think of Vietnam as a country and not as a war like before, doing trade and investment. So that trend is a good trend.
Something I would call a miracle that took place in Rwanda. It's you can't just believe that after such a catastrophe taking place, you will see a change, and there has been a change. Having to deal with a situation of total despair, of total destruction, hopelessness, if I can put that way. When people had completely lost any belief in life, any belief in love. Achieving that is part of this political will, which our leadership tried to get all the lay people to own.
Some of the responsibility lies on us as well. We don't just blame the others. We are not behaving as mature people. We have to look in our past in order to learn and see what went wrong and try to correct it and taking into account, the other and building the future.
East Timor, we lost 1/3 of our population. Every family in East Timor, at least one of them died or in prison because of perhaps the hope that we had international community, good people all over the world, that we never had to use extreme options like killing a civilian.
You cannot solve problems of relations between people, between human beings by violence. At the end of the day, you cannot solve the problems.
the leaders have to be clear. Everybody can be changed. Human beings, they are basically have the good inside. Killing an Indonesian civilian will not help our cause, but will undermine the Timorese cause, will create more enemies than friends, will create more hatred and more hatred. During these years, we always try to have a dialogue. And during the process, many Indonesians join and they help the Timorese. And so today it's easy to start a new relations with Indonesia.
The UN designated the year 2001 as the year of dialogue among civilizations, and this was basically the philosophy. Unfortunately, what happened on 9/11 just preceded by a few weeks the commemoration of that in the United Nations, and 9/11 overshadowed everything that we did. But I don't think it is too late to go back to that, because the concept is very much alive.
We have one of our ex-presidents is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and he managed to push forward a peace plan in Central America when it was a very convulsed region full of revolutionary groups and dictatorships. And he did so not with teeth. Costa Rica did not have any teeth to enforce peace. He managed to do what the US and Ronald Reagan in particular tried to do through teeth and failed. So I think that in history you can find many other instances in which just through patience and dialogue you get what you're striving for. And obviously at a much less human cost. And then the possibilities of truly building the peace after is a lot easier.
It's always preferable to have a very nasty debate here than to have a very little war somewhere. It's much better. So I think that is a sign of evolution in the international system.
Debate in the UN is a form of warfare by another mean, much more civilized. But it's not an attempt at understanding.
The best compromise is that when everyone involved is equally unhappy with the result.
Not too unhappy, but yeah.
Equally unhappy. And they know about each other, that the other side is also unhappy and had to pay something for the solution. So they will be unhappy because they lost quite a lot. But they will be left with something what enables them to go for the future. Like with the marriage counseling. To reach that, you must know not only what people say, but what people think. And not only what people think, but why they think probably in that way. And it's a learning process.
In the work of the group on dialogue, we started listening to each other and experiencing whether it was possible to develop the commonalities more than trying to simply talk at each other and try to pick up points from one another and respond with those points. And I think that was a very rewarding experience for all of us, that enabled us to see that there are a good number of areas where we had commonalities. So if you allow diplomats an opportunity to engage in an attempt to understand one another without trying to score points and negotiate a text, then I think that would be a very rewarding experience and in fact an eye-opening experience.
What we call solidarity camps, where people meet and talk about their history and try to overcome whatever used to divide them and to focus on what can unite them. And that was really, really very successful. We call it in Kinyarwanda gacaca. It's a sort of traditional justice which is grounded by our traditional ways of settling issues, and this used to happen in our rural areas, the way they used to settle the different conflicts arising in the community. So this gacaca justice is aimed at challenging, getting the Rwandan people to challenge themselves, just to be able to say the truth. Everything happened under their eyes. They witnessed everything. It's important. It's important not to hide what happened to young generations, because the future belongs to them. So first of all, they have to know what happened and what caused it, and get them to think positively as to the future. Get them to reject all those policies which grounded the implementation of the genocide, and to get them to feel like they belong to one nation. Some people apologize towards the victims, and through all that process, for the victim it will be like a relief. If, for instance, you have committed something bad to me, I will be very much relieved if you get to acknowledge that you committed it. And if you apologize, I will be much keen to forgive you, yes.
Is forgiveness there or not?
It is there. It is there, and we believe that. I mean, because we are all human beings.
The human being, when he's born, is a kind, honest, straightforward, laughing, smiling baby. That is humanity.
Periods in our history where we really achieved a certain international projection. I'm not saying that all moments of greatness pass, but to a certain extent, yes, they do. I mean, there are always others, and it's a very good thing that rise in power. The rise in power of human beings to control their destiny and to achieve things, to live comfortably and to generate wealth. Never was power in the world so great. Let's make the best of this power, and those of us who concentrate a certain political and military power must make this power act for the benefit of all humanity. I mean, in the end, that's the only thing that can ensure our own happiness.
The human beings, I mean, are made to realize their mistakes, to realize, I mean, how they should and they could live for a better cause. I mean, they will do it.
The United States has a potential. That potential can be deployed to serve humanity, or it can be deployed to lead to that confrontation that we are all trying not to. That is, I think, issue 1, 2, 3 amongst the priorities that should be dealt with today.
This is either something that we have to do it all together, or suffer from it altogether.
You must sit down with your greatest enemy and just try to talk, and just getting to know him personally, and him getting to get to know you. You will break lots of ice and lots of silences, and that will allow you to inch forward. No doubt, inch forward. You know, And that then eventually there will be an opening, a window of opportunity. And when you see that window of opportunity, no matter how small, you have to plunge in it.
We honor the many unknown thousands who have and continue to carry forward such human spirit. We give thanks to those who encouraged and inspired us and helped us heal our great man-made divides. They helped us break through our simplistic labels, our rhetoric, our propaganda, our fear. Solutions are always buoyed by good governance and leaders with humanitarian vision. No diplomat thinks extremists will go away. We are all in agreement around the world that we need strong intelligence, freezing of assets, efficient coordinated special ops, and policing. The path to overcome a war of ideology is personal and well-worn. It's rolling up our sleeves, going directly to people who reside in the heart of each other's ideology, going into schools, workplaces, mosques, synagogues, and churches, not for photo ops, but to join in the tough, committed work of dialoguing, leading us all to further understand, respect, and hear each other. That's what they did, and that's what we need now. Largely uncovered by the media, people streaming by hour upon hour, further than the eye can see. Are these people hateful and subversive? I don't think so. It's always encouraging to the human spirit and community when people mass not simply against something, but for truth in government, for our environment, for the pursuit of justice, for corporate responsibility, for prison reform, for education, healthcare, for jobs, for basic human rights, to end wars among us, for global solidarity, and more. Not just voting, but exercising conscience. Dissent is one of the great gifts, privileges, and responsibilities of democracy. We carry with us and honor those who've given their lives for its preservation. Thank goodness citizens care not just for their kind, but for others. That's what it's about. And it's an old tradition. Let's fully appreciate those who tend our sacred and ancient connection to the earth. We know there's a fuel and oil shortage looming in a brief few decades. Do we need to be secretive, possessive, underhanded, and grab it militarily? Or can we be a bit more mature, fair, and creative about it? Actually share and teamwork together. Let's help guide the world's military industry jobs towards sustaining the earth. Wind, hydrogen, and clean technology jobs, yes, but moving more swiftly towards ideas such as getting solar collectors to harness and safely laser beam down our energy needs, radiating endlessly, given to us freely by our sun, not owned by anyone. Can we keep military conquest out of this realm? Space not only answers our adventurous spirit, it directs us deeper into our world, our universe, our creation, our spirit, leading us not only to untold useful scientific discoveries and resources, but to our survival. These are good jobs. We can do this.
Way to go, buddy.
Is the best of human evolution just competing against one another? Superior races, superior nations, superior paths to God? Is it you're with us or against us? Or is it that we just have to also expand on the us and remember the human race? And may it have to do with challenging and stretching our own limits, strengthening our own self-discipline, encouraging each other onward to give our best, in fighting ideologies, finding our common ground, and there's always common ground, pulls the fuel from the fires of hate and allows those bridges to be rebuilt and fills our sails on wondrous journeys. No one is naive, and if people say you don't know how the world works and that you are simply idealistic, you tell them you do know. We're running this race together because you've seen the misery, the injustice, the cruelty, and the horror, and you do know better. You know how life can be realistically when we work hard together. and we will. Remind them to be very hard on the problems, but softer on the personal attacks. Some say that it's now a new and different world, with our safety always at risk. No matter how much more terrifying life may get, yielding to this fear magnifies our darkness, agony, and suffering. All throughout human history, there have been periods of absolute terror, inhumanity, total fear, when no child nor mother was safe. And all throughout this human history, there arrived regular people who have helped each other return to reason, to trade, to friendship, fellowship, to the adventure and joys of learning and sharing life with others. Is a cooperative and respectful world a weak concept, a sentimental emotion, or is it a reflection of our greatest strength? Way to go.
La de da de da, la de da de da, da de day. I once walked up to you, understanding through your eyes, your touch. So many feelings. I wanted to walk through the skylight, bright as a feeling of the moon, shining low forever, tangible forever, forever, forever. Shining for your light.